What is going on, guys? Jason Burke here, Styles Clash for Life, coming at you on YouTube. And today I've got another edition of The Drive-In, where I watch recently released films and tell you guys whether they're worth watching, worth waiting for, or worth skipping altogether. Today I'm reviewing one that kind of came out of nowhere. The trailer kind of caught everyone's attention. Being a hardcore slasher fan, having that be one of my favorite genres, that like throwback 80s slasher, being a sucker for films like that, when I saw the trailer for this, I was pretty excited. It had a limited theater run. I think it's an IFC Shudder film. So limited theater run. It just came to VOD a few days ago. And as soon as it came to VOD, before it even got to Shudder, I had to buy it. I had to watch it. And I'm talking about today a spoiler-free review of 2024's In a Violent Nature. Lots of conjecture about this one, lots of conversation, and I've got some pretty strong, albeit brief opinions. In a Violent Nature, again, I'm not going to spoil it. It just came out on VOD. It's available for rent for like $7 or $8 on YouTube. It's coming to Shudder fairly soon. Some places might still have it in theaters. But spoiler free, basically this movie is written and directed by Chris Nash, who his only kind of feature film credit, he does mostly SFX work. I saw he did stuff for Psycho Goreman and a couple other films. I think his segment on ABCs of Death 2 was kind of his directorial debut for a feature film, even though it was a segment. But a lot of cool effects work, and that shows in this film. Chris Nash's strength looks to be his effects, and that showed. Starring Ryan Barrett as Johnny. Basically, this is the 80s style walk-in slasher story of a kid who is mentally handicapped, mentally challenged, and he gets bullied by small-town laborers who pick on him for being mentally challenged, winds up in a freak accident, his family freaks out, and he kind of comes back for revenge. So it is very much kind of out of the playbook of a Jason Voorhees story. Starting with the positives, there are two big positives that shine through in this movie. The first is the cinematography. So the kind of gimmick of this movie that separates it from other kind of standard slasher fare is that the camera follows the POV of the killer for like 90% of the time. So you're seeing the shots of what the killer's looking at, you're seeing the shots from the bushes, you're seeing the behind the back of the killer, you're watching the killer walk in stock. All of this is done from antagonist POV, which we all get those shots in like Sleepaway Camp and Friday the 13th. We get those shots of the killer briefly lurking in the bushes or walking around slowly in the woods, like the foot shots, but you don't often see the full thing being done from that killer's POV, which is what this movie brings to the table. That being said, there are a lot of cool POV shots that stand out in this. You get a lot of long, drawn-out camera angles that are unbroken shots, uncut shots, just a lot of long takes, and a lot of movement takes. I don't know if they used a lot of handheld, obviously a lot of gimbals and tripods. Did a lot of movement shots on this, so probably a lot of gimbals. But considering how much movement sometimes and how much kind of spin around of the camera. They did a spin around shot where they're doing stuff with the campfire story when the kids are telling kind of the backstory of the movie. As you'd expect, you get a lot of consistent movement in the circle of the campfire. You get a lot of shots following the killer on uneven ground. So really steady, really smooth, really good transitional movement. Everything feels in focus. Everything feels steady. The cinematography is really, really nice. This kind of style lends itself to need a good cinematographer and to show off what your camera work can do, and they do that here in spades. Very good camera work. The other big thing is the gore. Again, Chris Nash comes from gore, and I'm not sure if he was the one that did the gore on this or just kind of supervised or had ideas from the script of what the gore was to be, but when you're watching a slasher movie, especially one when the killer is the only kind of fleshed out character, so to speak, you kind of just wait to see how the other characters are going to die, and you want spectacular deaths. You want standard slasher fare with really good gore, and you get that in this movie. There's one kill in particular that's my favorite, that you get a kind of a personal origami. It's kind of a slow kill with a lot of blood, and there's a lot of moving body parts. There's a lot of body transitioning before death in this scene up on a mountaintop is all I'll say. I won't spoil anything, but there's one particular kill that goes on for a long time and just gets more and more gruesome. So there is some indie charm to this movie with all the gore, with all the long shots, with trying to be unique in certain ways, that reminds me of Terrifier. Terrifier has a cult of personality that has a grassroots movement behind it because it's a true, legit indie film made by true, legit horror fans that got itself into theaters and got bigger budgets and more time as it went on. And I think something like this lends itself to that too, because it's a genuine slasher film from the bygone era, but it takes its time to have unique technical aspects and really relish in its gore, where back in the day when you're watching Jason, you hear all those stories about classic horror films being cut down by the MPAA because they couldn't get a rating to get themselves in theaters, so they had to cut kills constantly, so the directors never got their full vision for what they want their kills to be. This one does, so it's going to have some fans based on that alone. Now into the negatives, because everything else for me falls into the negatives. The pacing of this movie, my God, I could have gone and gotten 5 cavities filled and come back, and the killer would still be walking through the woods. And I probably would have had a better time getting those cavities filled. This thing, that's part of the negative of what it tries to do, to be a POV that genuinely turns a slasher movie into an art house A24 style film. This is if Friday the 13th went to college at A24 school, is what this movie is. So in trying to genuinely follow a killer and relish in what it is, it becomes very slow. You're just watching a dude walk through the woods slowly. And yes, it does feel like you're following Jason or Hatchet through the woods, but it's really, really dry sometimes, and some of these kills take a long time. There's an opening sequence that's just like 12 minutes where you're just like, oh, you're just going to walk through the woods the entire time. It does try to be art house, but I think the pacing, at least for me and for others that I've heard from, it is a slog, man. Watching just some dude walk through the woods, it just becomes waiting for the next kill. And I think it fails in that. This is an hour and 34 minutes, so really about an hour and a half plus credits. And it feels like you're watching a 2-hour slasher just without all the pizzazz between the kills. You get cool kills, but they come so quickly that is the juice worth the squeeze? I don't know. It feels like a lot of squeezing for very little juice. And sometimes you don't get any juice for 20 minutes between times. So you're just watching a dude walk through the woods. Characters. The characters in this movie, nothing is really well fleshed out. You do get an antagonist backstory a little bit, but it's very bare bones. It's very much like taking the Jason story and giving it one extra leg is really all it's doing. This is no further fleshed out than Friday the 13th, and that had an excuse because of the time period it came out in. But my goodness, you get the barest of reasons to understand the Johnny character, the antagonist, and nobody else makes a damn. Nobody else matters in this whatsoever. They literally just wanted to give you the tiniest bit of backstory to make this style of slasher film exist. So you get a bare bones reason for why this killer's a killer, and you get nothing else. None of the other characters matter. They just go into a cabin in the woods to be slashed. And it is just painful because, again, when you're watching these movies and this happens, you feel like, well, at least I can root for good gore. And you do get that, but you get it few and far in between, and they don't even try. At least in Friday the 13th, you get a good final girl, or you get a good relationship, or you get a good kind of a handicapped character that you cheer for, or you get the comic relief character that's kind of funny, or you at least get some really cool sequences of different places. You get something to the meat on the bone, and this doesn't give you meat on the bone with the antagonist or the protagonists. The story goes along with the characters. It's just some dude gets picked on, gets killed, comes back for revenge, and gets a bunch of nameless, faceless people where he gets to kill them in a very gory way. And in the meantime, you have to watch him walk around and stand there and stare and just do long shots. So yes, artistically, it's cool to change it up, but I think this was done in a much better way in 2 other places that I named and I saw some friends name as well. The Friday the 13th video game, the new one, the PS4/5 game by, I think, Gun Media, they do a really good job of when you're playing as Jason in the woods, he gets to walk and stalk, but he's trying to locate people, and he gets to zip and use powers and get right to those people. So that's done in a faster pace, and you get those cool moments of the sound effects, and you get to watch him walk through the woods. But you're not just walking around finding nobody and standing there and staring. You're using your powers to get to the people. So the video game does it better. And Behind the Mask: The Rise of Leslie Vernon takes a kind of more comedic, but a docu-series kind of farce version of the genre where you follow around the killer and you watch them do what they do, and you get kind of interviews with the killer. So yeah, it takes it out of the standard slasher and mixes in some comedy that I think is mixed well, but you get a look at the killer and a look at the killer's POVs and what the setups are before the killer kills, and it's more fun, and it's better paced, and it's more lively, and there's more rationale, and all the characters mean more. And because of the interviews, you get a better character backstory for the killer. It's just, they do it so much better. So bad pacing, bad characters, bad story, nothing original about it. And the dialogue in these characters, they just kind of join us in progress with these characters sometimes to say some really either stereotype stuff or some like Gen Z type stuff. And it's just forced dialogue, and it feels cheesy, and it feels like it's thrown in there just to set up for a kill. So while I give this movie some credit for being artsy and trying to take a killer POV approach and bring back the slasher genre, because I love slashers, this feels incredibly one note. It feels incredibly boring. If you like old slashers, you'll find some novelty in the killer POV, and you'll enjoy the gore. Other than that, there's nothing else to bite down on this. There's no motivation, really. There's no story. There's no characters. And the pacing in this feels like you're running a marathon with no end in sight. So for me, I'm going to give this a little bit of a harsh rating. And I know I've been harsh this year on a lot of films a lot of you guys like. Some people will like this, again, for being an indie that relishes in its gore. It's going to have its fan base, but that fan base is not me, sadly. I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 10. Am I being too harsh on this? Please tell me in the comments down below. Please like, share, and subscribe to these deep dive videos if you want to see me review other movies in theaters and on apps. I think I'm doing stop motion next. I've heard that one's very slow as well, and I've got a hard time with slow-paced things, so we'll see how that goes. Covering stop motion later this week. I just covered The Strangers Chapter 1 last week, so go back to my last video and check out The Strangers Chapter 1 review as well. But tell me in the comments down below what you thought of this one, if you've seen it. If you have not, it is currently on streaming on, you can buy it on YouTube and Amazon Prime, coming to Shudder very soon. So check it out and see if you like it. It wasn't for me, but it might be for you. Take care, guys. Stay scared.